Welcome back to another GGF video, and today we'll be taking a look at the ROG STRIX X870-I gaming Wi-Fi. Now this is their ITX version of their new AMD board. Now I want you to take a guess on which one is the new one and which one is on the X670E. So basically this is the new one, this is the previous gen one here, which I happen to have. Still actually has its plastic on. I'll just remove that one so don't get any reflections. Now, not too much has changed with this board. I would say the biggest changes would be the aesthetics of it, and then of course the Wi-Fi. Basically all the new boards will have the new Wi-Fi 7. I'll cover that a little bit later on. Now, I want to know your thoughts on how good this looks on the top of this heatsink. It's got this sort of holographic design. It's really interesting. As you look at the original one, it kind of had the bit of a shimmer to it, but nothing like on this one here. Now, when you get some light on it, I'll try and switch back to the other view on the front, and it really picks up any light. So it'd be really good to see what this looks like in a case, because I really think RGB is going to reflect off that. I think for some people it might be a little bit too much. I know people like their more toned down boards and nothing too over the top, but I think it's definitely something different than what I've seen before. Now, you may have noticed I said that this board is the X870-I. It's not the X870E-I. Now, just like on the previous video with that all white Strix, it was the X870, the non-E. Now, most of these specs are exactly the same as the previous X670E. So that one had the E, this one is the non-E, but all the specs are pretty much the same in most areas. Now, that's because ASUS could get away with not needing to go up that extra E variant. I do believe it requires an extra chip, so why have that extra chip if you require that extra cooling and you don't need it? So all the specs are the same. Like, you still get the full 16, you still get the 2 PCIe M.2s, you got a Gen 5 and a Gen 4, exactly the same as on this one, but you do have some extra features on this one. So as I said in that previous video, or because it has the non-E, don't think that, oh, should I go with the previous gen because it's the E model, because this one will have less features. It doesn't. I just wanted to get that out of the way. Now, the power phase design is the same as before, 10+2, so nothing different there. You have 2 DIMM slots supporting up to 96. Now, the other 2 boards I covered obviously had 4 DIMMs, so that'll support double. This supports only 96 because of the 2, and the largest we get are those 2 48 gigabyte modules, and that's up to 8400 mega transfers, and I believe that's the fastest we've looked at out of the 3 boards I've covered, probably because this is RTX being 2 slots. We should get a little bit faster than if you were on the other boards, and just the way it's done. Now, for the M.2s I covered, you get a Gen 5 and a Gen 4, same as before. I'll get some B-roll on moving this monstrosity of I think this is a triple stacked heatsink. We got the bottom, we have the middle, we have the top. There's even a fan here. It's just ridiculous how complex these are. You can just see in there. So one of them is Gen 5 and one of them is Gen 4. I'm not exactly which one is which, but it is the same as on this one. One Gen 4, one Gen 5. I really wish they could somehow work out how to get the 2 Gen 5s. Like, I can't see why, because we just have the one 16 by and then the 2 slots. Even if we could have a switch to run this at 8 by, because you really don't need the full 16 if it's running Gen 5, and then we could get the 2 Gen 5s for the M.2s. That'd be pretty cool. We have Wi-Fi 7. If you've been following my previous 2 videos on those boards, this one is actually Wi-Fi 7 with the 320 megahertz channel bandwidth, so that'll get you the maximum you can get with Wi-Fi 7. A lot of the other mid-tier or a lot of the previous Wi-Fi 7 boards that aren't on this new AMD chipset are only the 160 megahertz width channel for the Wi-Fi, and you may find that your Wi-Fi router, access point, anything like that may not even support the 320. You'll need it specifically the newer Wi-Fi 7. And of course, with all of their new Wi-Fi 7 boards, we have the new, I would say, quick release, which is I'm sure they've got a Q name for it. I'm sure they've got something like a Q, or they've already got Q release twice. They could come out with something different, but you just pop that on and then straight away pop it off, and that's it. No more spinning around. That was so painful with that old technology. Like these ones, having to spin that round and round and round and round to get that on. Now it's just very simple. Push it on and then away it goes. Some other features, we get the HIVE. Now, if you're familiar with this one, this is the X670-I. It came with this HIVE. This is the one from this board, very similar. So what this did is, it's kind of like a diagnostic tool. It had USB on it, had USB-C, it had a headphone port, it had the volume control, had a mute, it had the actual power button. You can turn your system on. And then it actually had your post codes along there. I wish they kind of had a little diagram of what was what, but I'm assuming that would just either go to that one, then the next one, then the next one. Now, on this one here, this HIVE from this board actually had the BIOS name under it, so you could actually flash your BIOS from using this. This just connected via USB-C back to the board. It did give you the extra ports, but yeah, this one doesn't say BIOS. I'm not sure if you can still flash your BIOS with this, but it's just a little tool. It is magnetized. Obviously, the Secret Lab desk is made of metal, so that sticks on there nicely, and that's just a little bit of a handy device if you want those extra features. And that's been coming with this. I think this is the first one. I'm not sure if the Intel variant of the Z790 came with it, but I definitely know this board came with it, and now this one does as well. Another interesting area with their iGaming boards as of late, I'm not sure how many series or gens they go back, they have this little add-on card. Now, I kind of do like this and then I don't. One, it does get in the way. Now, it's interesting how they do this. They do two male, these ones are called the male USB-C, and then you have two made in USB-C, and it just simply drops in and then it plugs in like that. And this basically gives you your two SATA, your two dual USB 2, and then it gives you your front panel headers. Now, if you were doing a build in a small case and you didn't need, say, USB internal headers, you didn't need SATA, you could just be like, all right, I don't need this card at all. But unfortunately, the front panel headers are on this card. So you need this card just to run your front panel to get that going. I just wish they could have put the front panel somewhere else. Like, they may have even done that. I haven't had much time to even look into that. Actually, there is a power button on this board. I can see we have a power button and a T sensor. So it looks like they do now have just the power button if you don't wish to run this board. So that is good, because then you don't have to run this whole little, like, I wouldn't say it's that big, but when you have some really nice memory in there, and most of the time your memory may not even be as high as this card, it just sticks in there and it kind of gets in the way. Now, when I mentioned you've got the fan for the M.2, there's also the fan for the VRM cooling. We'll try and get a shot of that. That's in there. That's a 40 mil, might even be less than 40 mil. It's pretty small. And then we also have the one in this spot here for the M.2, and that just blows this way, or it may blow this way. I'll just see which way. Now it blows this way through your M.2 slot. So two fans there. I think when you boot these boards, I definitely know on this one, those fans, they're both controllable, but it does a bit of a power on self-test, and those fans do sort of rev up and then they do rev back down. The USB on the I/O is pretty much the same, but you do gain an extra USB 10 gig USB-C, but you do lose a 10 gig USB-A. So they pretty much just swapped an A to a C, no real difference there. And then I mentioned you do get that extra Wi-Fi as well. And then something I mentioned on the Hero, I didn't mention on the Strix A, but this is on all of their new boards, is their new Q-Dash, which is in the BIOS. You'll go to the tools and there'll be a Q-Dash option, and that's just basically an exploded diagram of the, wouldn't say exploded diagram, it's just a diagram of the board itself. And then it'll have sort of lines and then names for each device or each item you have plugged into the board, and it'll be green if it's plugged in, or it'll be just not green if it's not. So for your M.2s, if you have one plugged in, that part will be green. If it's not plugged in, it just won't be green. And that's just a little visual indicator to show you what's going on with your board, what's there and what's not, rather than having to dig down to, you normally go to like the hardware information, you go to your M.2, see what drives are in there. It's more like the sort of the quick start page that you brought to, like the home page, but I would say it's easier to read because you can physically see where everything is on the board. And then more to that, if you click on one of those items, so say you click on the CPU fan header that you have a fan plugged into, it'll take you to that option in the BIOS rather than having to narrow your way down to find out where that is. If you click on something like the M.2, it'll take you to that area, which is pretty neat. And then you can also filter different areas. So if you just want to have like SATA enabled or M.2 enabled or USB enabled, you can just narrow it down to see what is enabled for those devices. That's pretty cool. I haven't actually had to play around with that yet. I've just been throwing up the link on the website. You can just Google that to learn about that. And that is going to be on all of these new AMD boards, which is good to see. But unfortunately, I don't have a price on this board. I wasn't given that in my information on these boards. I had the price on the other ones. The Hero was $700, I believe. The Strix A was $370. And then this one, I don't have a price on that one. But anyway, I do want to thank ASUS for sending these out. I will be using all these boards in some upcoming builds, so stay tuned for that. And thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.